Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our guests today are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show.
Morning.
Good morning. And
Good to be here.
our own Ivan Kucherenko from Kiev, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hi, Jonathan. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Yeah, it's well known. There are a lot of to talk about, but we all know that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So therefore, I would like to start with a video presentation. Ivan, please proceed.
Yeah, let's start with this.
You have surely heard about Azov, an eminent unit of the Ukrainian army that defended Mariupol for months despite complete Russian encirclement. How was it created, and is it really that hard to join? Why has Azov precisely become a prime enemy of Russian propaganda? Most importantly, does the regiment's story continue after the captivity on Azovstal? Spoiler, it does. The year 2014. Russian troops enter Ukrainian Crimea. Russia starts a hybrid war against Ukraine. Large cities of eastern Ukraine are captured: Donetsk, Luhansk, and Mariupol. The Ukrainian army is perplexed while the enemy seems capable of further advance. In response, Ukraine experiences a boom of volunteers willing to fight. People ready to defend their motherland instantly form new military units. This is when Azov starts shaping. In May 2014, a group of volunteers form a police battalion in the southeastern town of Berdyansk. It is named after the Azov Sea, which washes the southeast of Ukraine. In the beginning, this battalion counts 400 people. None of them are paid, most don't have combat experience, and nearly a half are students. They wear balaclavas and go by the call signs instead of names. All because most of them came from the east of Ukraine, often having relatives who live in the cities captured by the Russian proxies. After a month of training, Azov advances toward the captured Mariupol, engaging in urban combat. Motivated Azov recruits fight to their full power. In one day, Azov liberates the city that many of its members call home. A unit that came out of nowhere, incredibly motivated, forced to hide its faces. How can Russia counter it? Of course, with some classical methods invented 80 years ago by Joseph Goebbels. Accuse the other side of that which you're guilty. That's when the Kremlin propaganda started depicting the Ukrainian army as bloodthirsty murderers and Nazis. Putin attacked Ukraine and occupied Crimea painlessly for the world, the same way Hitler did it with Austria in 1938. Kremlin propaganda didn't accept that regular Ukrainians could stand up to defend their country, so it repeated the narrative about Nazism again and again. In 8 years, Putin has expanded this narrative to the entire Ukraine army, justifying the war with the necessity of denazification. A year after the full-scale invasion in 2022, Russian troops have not achieved a single objective and suffered several painful defeats. Great merit in ruining Russia's plans belongs to Azov, which has grown from a volunteer battalion of police to the National Guard Brigade, one of the fiercest combat units of our time. Since the year 2014, Azov has taken part in the major battles of the war in Donbass. British journalist Askold Krushelnitsky has witnessed the formation and first fight of Azov. He has described the incredible motivation the fighters had from the very beginning. The morning routine at their base included 90 minutes of morning exercises and physical activity. Since then, the training has become even more demanding. Not everyone can join Azov. Similarly to the United States Marine Corps, Azov has an intense recruiting course. Those willing to join the unit have 5 weeks to prove their readiness to serve in Azov. 35 days of exhausting physical and mental tests make most people quit the training before it ends. The recruits don't have names. Before joining Azov, they only have a number on their hand. All they do is run, shoot, plant explosives, plan operations, and learn tactical medicine. If they can keep up, they're in Azov. But it is only the beginning. Further on, every fighter chooses specialization: artillery, tanks, sniping, reconnaissance, demining. This is when the half-year training of the actual Azov fighters starts. Main principle, every day at training, is another second lived through combat. In 2022, Russia planned to quickly capture the Azov shore to form a land corridor to Crimea. It didn't go as planned, as the garrison of 4,500 defenders of Mariupol, half of which were from Azov, became an obstacle.
26 лютого, 10 година ранку, місто Маріуполь. Полк Азов разом з Збройними силами України, Національною гвардією та іншими силовими структурами надійно обороняє місто Маріуполь. Ми будемо битися до останньої каплі крові. Нам не страшні, а не ворожі танки, а не ракетні удари, а не ворожа авіація. Я наказую кожному бійцю полку Азов битися до останнього. Ми будемо знищувати росіян у повітрі, на землі та на воді. Разом до перемоги. Слава Україні!
Yet Russia sent an enormous amount of troops toward Mariupol. Russians advanced in a wide formation. However, Azov fighters had an advantage. For many of them, Mariupol was a hometown, so they knew the city exceptionally well. The stubborn resistance of the Ukrainians in Mariupol forced Russians to engage forces that were supposed to assault other cities in south and central Ukraine.
Щодня захисники міста, перебуваючи в повному оточенні, мужньо та самовіддано б'ють ворога, знищують техніку, знищують генералів, офіцерів, солдат Російської Федерації.
This was when the Russian army appealed to their Syrian strategy. Up to 100 aviation bombs were launched at Mariupol every day. Before the invasion, 430,000 people lived here. 80% of the buildings in the city were destroyed. Many of those buildings sheltered the civilians in the basements. Eventually, Azov retreated to Europe's biggest metallurgical plant, 3 times the size of New York's Central Park, the Azovstal. Along with them, more than 2,000 civilians found shelter on the 3 underground levels of the plant. Among them were hundreds of children who hadn't seen sunlight for months.
Мы бы так бы играли в телефон, но хочется домой, хочется солнце увидеть.
After a few months under the siege, Azovstal, named after the sea just like Azov Regiment, remained the only place in Mariupol with the Ukrainian flag waving above it. Despite the colossal risk, Ukrainian helicopters roamed to the plant at low altitudes. They were evacuating the heavily injured and bringing ammunition in. However, after the 5th flight, some helicopters were struck down, and this small stream of aid was forced to stop. Volunteers from all over Ukraine formed a unit meant to breach into Mariupol and unblock Azov.
Давай просто збирати людей, які, можливо, нас деблокують. Отак я сказав, можливо. Тому що я розумів, що ми зараз почнемо збирати цивільних людей, які сильні духом, але не мають, на жаль, досвіду ведення бойових дій.
However, several attempts to break through ran into the echelon defense of Russia.
Але на той момент це вже затягнулося досить довго, і лінія оборони противника була досить кріпко побудована.
At the end of spring 2022, the Ukrainian command made a decision. The Mariupol garrison had accomplished its mission. New objective – to save the lives of the defenders.
Вище військове керівництво дало наказ про збереження життя та здоров'я військовослужбовців гарнізону та припинення оборони міста.
The defenders of Mariupol ended up in Russian captivity. Putin promised to save their lives, but it was another Russian lie. On the night of July 28th, an explosion happened in the Olenivka settlement prison, where Azov fighters were held. More than 50 people died. CNN conducted an investigation proving that the Russians were responsible for the attack. Moscow did not allow the UN and Red Cross on the site of the tragedy. The world has learned the details of the incident from the Azov fighters released from captivity. In September 2022, 215 soldiers, including 108 Azov fighters, returned home after prisoner exchange. Commanders of Azov were exchanged to 55 Russian soldiers. By an agreement, they will stay in Turkey till the end of the war. The story of Azov continues. Just like back in 2014, motivated fighters stand up to defend their country again. All this time, veterans and recruits keep fighting.
Азов не повертається, Азов нікуди не зникав. Сюрприз. Ми весь цей час воювали. Навіть коли ми були в полоні, ОЗСП Азов воював.
They continue fighting for their dream, the liberation of their homeland from the occupants.
Что мотивирует далі боротися. Тут, отсюда, 100 километров до моего родного дома, до Мариуполя. По чуть-чуть, но мы идем вперед, я иду домой.
Thank you, Ivan. Fantastic presentation, and of course, Azov. It's becoming a symbol of a Ukrainian fight against aggressor, and we were aware, at least even here in Canada, about Azov since 2014. It was a name that everybody recognized, and I wish that they will continue their heroic fight in as a part of the overall Ukrainian army. Right now is, of course, the biggest story of the last few days, or the drone attack, or so-called attack, or whatever it might be, on Kremlin with the idea of killing Mr. Putin. Well, sometimes we have a lot of discussions in our programs about abortion, whether it should be forbidden or so on. Imagine that Putin's mother had an abortion. Wouldn't be the world today much better and safer place? I would think so. However, I would like to mention that there are opinions, of course, that Russian insinuated it themselves, and they're staged it. However, I wouldn't dismiss completely the idea that Ukraine made that attempt. And what's wrong with that? The Ukrainian being ferociously attacked every single day with great losses to Ukrainian civil population. So does Ukraine have a right to strike back on Russians on their territory? Ivan, what do you think?
First of all, I'd like to come back to my video about Azov, because today is a day when Azov regiment was founded. Today is their anniversary, and I'm on behalf of all Ukrainians wish to say thanks to the Azov fighters and other defenders of Ukraine. As for the drone attack on Kremlin, I'm not sure that these drones were actually flying from the Ukraine, because as far as I know, they were pretty small, and small machines were not able to fly such a huge distance from Ukraine to Kremlin and bypass all Russian anti-aircraft defenses.
They don't have aircraft defenses. You know.
Which they eventually put all throughout all the Moscow. But actually there are several versions of these drones and where they could appear from. There is a probability that these drones were launched by Russian rebels who actually fight on the Ukrainian side, and that they were launched somewhere from Russia. And another version is that Kremlin government, that Putin themselves decided to do such provocation. But anyway, I'm sure that Ukrainians have the whole right to defend ourselves and to attack any object on the Russian territory, because more than 1 year our civilian objects are being constantly attacked. Our civilians and our children are being killed, and attack on Kremlin, a symbol of Russian authority, actually is quite reasonable reaction from the Ukrainian side. but our officials say that Ukraine is not responsible for that attack. So let it be the probability that these drones were launched either by Russian rebels fighting on behalf of Ukraine or from Russian officials themselves in order to unite the Russian society around this act of severe attack on saint symbol of Russia, as they say.
Okay, I would like to just make a very small comment that if was indeed an attempt to kill Mr. Putin, it just doesn't make any sense, everything what's happening. First of all, the size you were mentioned absolutely correct is very, very small. Basically, all they could carry is the equivalent of a grenade. To do the job, they would need at least 50 kilos a device, if not more. Now, if you can imagine the structure which they were trying to hit in order to kill Mr. Putin, there is a dome. Under the dome, there is a place for the conference zal, conference facilities, and only under the conference facilities there is a exactly cabinet of working cabinet of Mr. Putin. But as we know, Putin is not a workaholic, and he never works at nights. And at that time, like 3 o'clock in the morning, he never ever worked in his life. So the likelihood of this attack to kill Mr. Putin, who is obviously not there, and very small equivalent of a hand grenade, this is complete nonsense whatsoever. Jonathan, what do you think about this story?
Again, I would say that, yeah, I would tend to agree with you that an attack that small is not really serious enough to, and given Putin's work habits and his pattern that you've told us about, it's really more of a propaganda, a false flag or a propaganda maneuver by the Russians to make it seem as if Ukraine is trying to directly assassinate Mr. Putin. I think that but as far as the principle of attempting to take out the opposing leadership or invading or striking the opponent's territory, I mean, there.
Yes, Jonathan is trying to collect his thoughts. In the meantime, we will mention that there are some other ideas are happening these days. First of all, the most important question is about Ukrainian attack. Has it already started? It hasn't already started. It's about to start. It will be postponed for several months. Actually, I heard very interesting comment by Azerbaijani military specialist Rustam Alizadeh. I'm not so sure. He's very, very good military expert, and he said that I don't understand why Ukrainians need this attack. They are well prepared to defend. They have now almost all weapons promised by the West and the United States. So they got it all to defeat Ukrainians today. If it was proved to be impossible a year ago, today it's no starter period. It's just impossible. It's like to fly on Jupiter today or in next half an hour or so. It just makes it impossible. So if a Ukrainian will keep their meat grinder working, yesterday was, according to Ukrainian Pravda, 620 Russians were killed. Not a great number, but still, if every day will be 620 for next several months, that's not so bad. So then why not to exhaust and keep weaken Russia and its army even farther and farther and farther? And he was quite eloquent and in his speech. So again, of course, I'm I'm looking forward to successful Ukrainian attack and wiping out all the Ukrainian army, or the Russian army in Ukraine. On the other hand, it's very difficult to resist the logic of this military expert from Azerbaijan. Jonathan, what do you think about this?
I think that again, as I've stated before, for the Ukrainians do not have the quote unquote luxury simply to expend their offensive potential in an attack just at any time, especially if the opponent is expecting it. And as I've said before, like a skilled boxer, Ukraine is looking, they are throwing local counterattacks, they're doing reconnaissance in force, they are probing, and they are looking for the right moment and the right place in which to unleash their main attack. And really, all this second guessing on the part of quote unquote Western military experts or other observers is simply irrelevant. It is not up to us to determine what the right time should be. It's up to the Ukrainian military and their leadership to determine, okay, now is the proper time and the proper place to launch the counterattack. And they cannot simply waste their newly acquired offensive potential simply just for the sake of saying, okay, we've launched our counteroffensive. When they launch their counteroffensive, they want to make it count to the maximum extent possible. And so they will wait until they see the proper moment and the proper opportunity. Now, we can make some intelligent guesses as to what the objectives should be, such as cutting off the Crimea from resupply, isolating it. That is a logical objective, but it is not necessarily the first immediate objective. And so the military may decide they have some other opportunities they need to exploit first, and especially if they determine if they launch an attack and the Russian military morale in that area suddenly collapses, then they want to be prepared to exploit that attack. For example, if they cut off the Crimea and other probes discover that the Russian military occupation force is suddenly just surrendering in mass, well, then it would be logical for them to exploit that and take advantage of that and sweep the Crimea clean. But it has to be up to the local Ukrainian military forces. What they have determined are the weak spots and where are the opportunities. They just do not want to waste a good opportunity. They want to make it count.
Yes, Jonathan, I'd like to add that, Ivan, do you remember a couple of days ago, Zelensky said that all these attempts to push Ukrainians into attack and even setting the date exactly when the attack will start and where the attack will start. He said that this is just diminishing chances for Ukraine to actually start the attack because it has to be unexpected, as you, Jonathan, said. And all these Ukrainian sources themselves are, in fact, on its way to help Russians to deal with this attack because it has to be very quick, very unexpected, and very sudden. And Ivan, what do you think about Ukrainian public media? How do you think about it?
First of all, I want to come back to that opinion of Azerbaijani expert, which you mentioned, and who said that it would be better for Ukraine to strengthen our defense and wait till all Russian forces will just disappear in Ukrainian meat grinder. Unfortunately, you've seen obviously what Russians have done in Bucha and other liberated places in Ukraine after several months of occupation of these cities, and every day of further occupations of Ukrainian cities by Russian is the day when they torture Ukrainians, when they kidnap Ukrainian children, and we can't just sit and wait till their army will disappear. We must retake our territories as soon as possible. This is the first
Ivan,
important thing.
very quick. Do you realize that Russians can still do all this horrible bombing from their own territory? Actually, from the equatorial of aquatic of Caspian Sea, they have based bombers there, like T-160, and of course, stupid. 295, I think. They're heavy bombers and they're capable to very long range attacks. Actually, when they first started attacks against Syria several years ago, 8 years ago or so, they started from Caspian Sea, and Syria is much farther than Ukraine, so they can continue even if Ukraine will start its counterattack and will get the Crimea and all the rest of the territory. Russia will have capabilities to and make enormous damage from their own territory. So
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is not.
They have obviously Ukrainian counterattack will not stop the war. Because Russia will have the possibility to strike Ukrainian territory using their long-range bombers and missiles, and the only option for this is to further strengthen of Ukrainian air defense system. But Ukrainian, I've heard a very interesting opinion that major Ukrainian attack will actually lead to the defeat of the Russian army, of the complete defeat of the Russian army, not just retaking the some part of territory, say like Ukraine retake them in Kiev region, in Chernigiv region, in Sumy and Kharkiv region, and in Kherson. All these times Ukraine retaken our territories, Russian army was able to flee, to escape from these occupied territories with high casualties, obviously, but they were able to retreat. And actually, Russian army was not defeated yet. But this attack really have the possibility to make a major defeat of Russian army, with lots of prisoners, with even more weapons and armored vehicles, which they will just leave, trying to fly away. And this will also strike a Russian morality, like it was during the First World War, when the defeat of the Russian army on the battlefields of the First World War accelerated the revolution in Russian Empire and change of the regime, and unfortunately appear of communists and Soviet Union as a downside of that process.
Became even bigger evil than the
unfortunately.
regime. Yeah. Ivan, just a very quick observation. Number one, compared to Kharkiv and Kherson, Russian army became much more numerous, not better, not stronger, but numerous. They got a lot of reserves, and even although most of these people are nothing but meat for Ukrainian meat grinder, but the numbers are quite substantial now. Also, another factor is that Russians are also learning during this war how to better fight, how to better organize themselves, or so on. It's not a big deal yet, but the process is underway. Jonathan, what do you think about it?
Well, at this point, even if the Russians are quote unquote learning how to fight better in this war, they have already wasted the better part of their high quality troops, their frontline troops. They were destroyed early on. It just because they've mobilized and they have larger numbers now, this does not mean that they are higher quality. Even though it was either Lenin or Stalin that had said that that quantity is a quality all its own, but not in this case. They are not bringing sufficient numbers to overwhelm Ukraine. On the other hand, the quality of the Ukrainian fighting forces has been steadily increasing, and better equipped, and with better logistics, and with a real capability to launch a serious counteroffensive. And the timing that is the prerogative of the Ukrainian leadership, and we should not be engaging in so much second guessing, because the thing they need, the element of surprise. They need at least tactical and operational surprise, so that the whenever the counteroffensive is launched, the Russian military forces will be caught unprepared.
Absolutely agree with you. And with that, I would like to end today's program. And thank you so much for participation. Wonderful video that we saw. And hopefully we'll have much better news on next week on Tuesday when we will get together. And we will know at that point what's happening with the May Red Square parade, whether it will take place or not take place or something happen.
That's in the hands of the Ukrainians.
Yeah, our next show will be just exactly on the 9th of May, on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So we'll discover what's happening with the Red Square.
Hopefully we'll have great news. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.